Using deformers in Cinema 4D allow you to create curved and twisted elements out of your primitive objects. So in this project we're going to distort these lines that have been extruded along the edge of our logo. To get started, obviously we have to be in Cinema 4D, so I'm going to select the Deformers C4D project and press Command E on my Mac, Control E on Windows to edit the original file. If we look in our Objects Manager, you can see we have our plus logo. That's an extruded illustrator shape, and we have this null object named bars, etc. Just so we can focus solely on the bars, I'm going to turn off the visibility of the H+ logo in our viewer. Let's go ahead and just double click on the top circle here. Now, just to remind you, if you hadn't seen this before, this just turns off the visibility of the object in the scene. If I click on the render button here, I'll be able to see that, and the model is still there. It's just disappeared out of our viewer for the time being. Let's open up our null object bars, etc. I want to focus on just bending one object for now. So let's click on this cube. I want to drag it up out of the null object just by clicking and dragging. Now we can collapse that null object. Since we have the cube out of the null object, let's go ahead and turn off the visibility for the bars. Now we can focus solely on our cube. If you press S on your keyboard, that will reframe the selected object. Now when you're bending objects, it's important to pay attention to the actual geometry of the model. So we need to go to the display options in our viewport. Let's change it to Gouraud shading lines. I can see I have some lines on the edge of my geometry, but it's really not that detailed. I'm just repositioning the scene by clicking all my different navigation tools in the upper right corner of the viewport. With the cube selected, I want you to go down to the object section. In here we can increase the number of segments. This was extruded along the Z-axis. I know this because it's the kind of bluish purple option here, and you can see the Z is moving through the scene. Let's increase the number of segments along the Z-axis. Notice each time I click, I'm getting a new line in my primitive object. Let's leave it set at a setting around 5. Now we can go ahead and add a bend deformer. If you go up to our creation tools, the fourth one from the right are the deformers. There are several different deformers we can apply. I'll start with the bend deformer. Now when you're working with deformers, I generally like to have the deformer centered up on the object I'm working with, and since the object is in the middle of the scene, we need to move deformer. I'm going to click on the 4 up view just by clicking on the button in the upper right corner, and here we can reposition the deformer just by clicking and dragging through the scene. So let's put it right in the middle of our object. Now notice the deformer has a control handle, very much like our primitive objects do. Let's make the perspective view the dominant view and then just click and drag. Well, nothing's happening. This is because we haven't actually applied the bend to the cube. So in order to apply a deformer, you need to click on the name and then drag down in the Objects Manager. You want to hover over the name of the model you'd like to apply the deform to, making sure that the arrow is pointing down. This will make the bend deformer the child of that object. Now notice I've changed the overall position, but it doesn't look like it's bending, so I'll just Command Z to undo that. What we need to do is rotate our bend deformer, so I'm going to go back over to my 4 up view here and just reset the strength of our bend down to 0 in the attribute panel. Now we can grab our rotation tool. The shortcut for rotation in Cinema is R. As long as we only have the bend deformer selected, we can go ahead and click on this red control band and rotate our deformer around. Now if I hold Shift as I'm rotating, it'll snap in 10-degree increments. Now that it's rotated on 90 degrees, we can go ahead and make the bend the child of the cube objects. So let's click on the bend object and drag it down onto the cube again. Again, making sure you have that down arrow. Now when we go ahead and click on this control handle, we can bend the object through the scene however way we like. Let's bend it over to the right. Notice when I zoom in and reposition, the bend isn't very smooth. That gets back to our geometry. So let's go ahead and select the cube here and increase the number of segments on the Z-axis by clicking and dragging in the double arrows. Now it's nice and smooth in its deformation. We can also make adjustments to how much of the object is bent. If you look in the top view here, I'm just going to maximize that view. Notice it's only bent in the section where it's going through the deformer. And when you have the deformer selected in the attributes panel, notice that the mode is defaulted to limited. I can change that to exactly within box, and it'll literally only deform whatever's in the box and whatever's outside of the box. It'll just snap off to the side. That's not what we want. Let's choose unlimited. Hey, check it out, when you do unlimited you can make curved shapes. So to give you a better idea as to what this looks like, let's jump back in our perspective view. Now I'll just zoom out so you can see creating curved objects is an awful lot of fun. When you're clicking and dragging in the perspective view, notice I can rotate all the way around. Now any of these perimeters are keyframeable. If you have this circle to the left of the name, you can see with primitive objects you can have all kinds of fun when it comes to animation. Now I know we only went over the bend deformer, but applying primitive objects works in the same fashion for all the other primitives and all the other geometry that you're going to be working with. All you have to do is make sure you apply the deformer as the child and make sure you have enough geometry for your adjustments.